Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Terrible Stories. I refused to switch seats on a plane so a family could sit together. I'm not a confrontational person by nature, but I also believe in the principle that if you pay for something, you should get what you paid for. That's why, 3 weeks before my flight from New York to Los Angeles, I made sure to pay extra for a window seat in the second row of the plane. I hate being cramped in the middle, and I get motion sick without a window view, so it was worth every extra dollar. The morning of the flight was already stressful. Security was slow, the airport coffee tasted like burnt water, and boarding took forever. By the time I stepped onto the plane, I just wanted to settle into my seat, put my headphones on, and zone out until landing. I found my seat 2A right by the window, just as I'd planned. I put my backpack under the seat in front of me, buckled up, and breathed a small sigh of relief. For a moment, I thought the rest of the flight might actually be peaceful. Then, a woman in her mid-30s stopped next to my row. She had a toddler in one arm, a boy of maybe 6 holding her hand, and an exasperated look on her face. Behind her was a man, presumably her husband, carrying an oversized diaper bag and juggling 2 rolling suitcases. They all looked flustered, but instead of moving past me to their own seats, the woman smiled tightly. "Excuse me," she said. "Would you mind switching seats with my husband so we can sit together as a family?" I glanced over and saw the husband pointing toward a seat about halfway down the aisle middle seat, of course, and right next to the bathrooms. My stomach sank. I'd paid for this seat specifically to avoid being in a spot like that. I shook my head politely. "I'm sorry, but I booked and paid extra for this seat in advance. I really need the window for the flight." Her smile faltered. "We have 2 kids. It's a long flight. You can understand why we want to be together, right?" "I do," I replied gently. "But this is the seat I purchased. Maybe the flight attendants can help you find another arrangement?" Her eyes narrowed, and the husband muttered something under his breath, something that sounded a lot like selfish. The boy stared at me, confused, and the toddler was already squirming in her arms. I could feel other passengers looking over, curious about the exchange. I kept my voice calm. "I'm sure they can help you," I repeated. She sighed, clearly frustrated, but moved past me. They started talking to the flight attendant a few rows back, and I turned my attention to the window, pretending to check something on my phone. I didn't think much more of it, at least, not yet. The truth was, I'd already had a rough week. I was heading to LA for an important work presentation, and I needed the flight to be a quiet space where I could rest and mentally prepare. I wasn't about to give that up for a seat I hadn't chosen and didn't want. What I didn't know at the time was that my refusal was about to become a lot more public than I ever intended, and not just on that plane. About 10 minutes later, the family had found seats somewhere behind me. I didn't turn around to see where exactly, but I could feel it. The low hum of irritation directed at the back of my head. You know when you're in a room and you can just sense people are talking about you? That was the vibe. As the rest of the passengers boarded, I scrolled through my phone, pretending I didn't notice. The flight attendant did come by to politely ask if I was sure I didn't want to switch, but when I repeated that I'd paid extra for my seat, she didn't push further. We were about 15 minutes from takeoff when I caught my first real glimpse of the social fallout. A woman across the aisle leaned toward me and whispered, "Wow, really couldn't help them out." She wasn't smiling. I blinked, caught off guard. "I paid for the seat," I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as I could. She shrugged, but it was that passive-aggressive kind of shrug that says, "I still think you're a terrible person." She put her earbuds in and turned away. When the captain announced we'd be departing shortly, I closed my eyes trying to block it all out. I reminded myself that I wasn't being unreasonable. People choose their seats for a reason, especially when they pay extra. I wasn't stopping them from sitting together out of spite. I just wasn't willing to sacrifice my comfort and sanity for a 5-hour flight. Half an hour into the trip, the first drink service started. The flight attendant handed me my ginger ale with a polite but noticeably cooler tone than she'd used earlier. A moment later, I heard a distinct tisk sound from behind me. Then came the voices low at first, then slightly louder. Couldn't believe it. Some people are so self-centered. Imagine not helping a family with kids. I didn't have to guess who they were talking about. My jaw tightened, but I stayed facing forward. About 2 hours into the flight, I got up to use the bathroom. As I walked past the row where the family was sitting, the husband didn't look up, but the wife gave me this tight, sarcastic smile like I'd just ruined her whole year. The boy sat in the middle seat, and the toddler was on her lap, dozing against her shoulder. I thought about saying something, anything, to smooth things over, but I knew whatever I said would either come off defensive or hollow. So I just walked on, keeping my head down. When I got back to my seat, the woman across the aisle gave me another glance. Not hostile this time, but pitying. Like I was the kind of person who just didn't get it. I told myself that once we landed, I'd never see any of these people again, and it wouldn't matter. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this little airplane drama was far from over. Turns out I was right. By the third hour of the flight, it was clear that the "you didn't switch seats" story had spread like cabin gossip wildfire. I'd noticed small, subtle things like when a passenger across the aisle would glance at me, then lean toward their seatmate and whisper. The whisper would turn into a short chuckle or a shake of the head. It was surreal, like I had somehow become the main character in a mid-air morality play. I tried to focus on my book, but every page I turned felt like it was accompanied by a chorus of silent judgment. It's funny. Before this, I never really thought about how confined and socially interconnected a plane is. There's nowhere to go, no escape, just recycled air, stale pretzels, and the unspoken hierarchy of good passengers versus bad passengers. Somewhere over the Midwest, a kid from the back, maybe 7 years old, wandered down the aisle past my seat. As he passed, he slowed down, gave me this big-eyed look, and then darted away like I was some kind of villain in a children's story. I actually laughed under my breath. It was absurd. The absurdity didn't last long. About an hour later, a man sitting 2 rows ahead of me got up to stretch. On his way back, he paused by my seat and said quietly, "You know, sometimes a little kindness goes a long way." I looked up, startled. "Excuse me." He just shook his head and kept walking. I sat there gripping my armrest, trying not to replay the moment on a loop. This wasn't just awkward anymore. Felt like I'd been assigned some scarlet letter of selfishness for the duration of the trip. Then came the kicker. About 45 minutes before landing, the mother from the family actually came up the aisle to speak to me. She crouched next to my seat, holding her toddler, and in a tone dripping with artificial sweetness said, "I just wanted to say I hope you enjoy all that extra legroom. Must be nice not having to hold a squirming 2-year-old for 5 hours." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. What was I supposed to say? Sorry you didn't plan ahead? Sorry you didn't buy seats together? The tension was so thick you could slice it with the complimentary plastic knife from lunch service. Before I could decide, she straightened up and went back to her seat, shaking her head in a way that made sure half the row saw it. I stared out the window for the rest of the flight, pretending to be fascinated by clouds. But my stomach was in knots. When we landed, I thought that was the end of it. But as we filed out of the plane, I caught snippets of conversation. My name wasn't mentioned, no one knew it. But the story of that passenger who refused to move for a family was alive and well. And the thing about stories is, they don't always stay on the plane. I thought stepping off the plane would be like stepping out of a pressure cooker. The whispers would stop, the glares would fade, and everyone would just scatter into the anonymity of the terminal. That's not what happened. As soon as I reached the gate area, I felt eyes on me again. The family was only a few feet ahead, reuniting with a group of relatives who had apparently been waiting for them. The mother wasted no time launching into a loud, animated retelling of the selfish passenger saga. She didn't point at me outright, but she didn't have to. The occasional sideways glance in my direction was enough to make it obvious who she was talking about. A man, probably her husband's brother, turned fully to look at me. He gave me this slow up-and-down scan, like he was assessing whether I was even human. Then he muttered something under his breath and laughed with the group. I could feel the heat rising in my face, and for a split second I considered walking over there and setting the record straight. But what would I even say? "Excuse me, strangers, but actually I'm not a monster. I just didn't want to spend 5 hours in a cramped middle seat so your family could be more comfortable at my expense." Yeah, that would go over great in a busy airport. Instead, I tried to keep moving toward baggage claim, but the mother called after me. Hey, just so you know, we'll be remembering your kindness. Her tone made it very clear it wasn't kindness she meant. A few nearby passengers turned to see what was going on, their expressions a mix of curiosity and judgment. My stomach dropped. I mumbled something like, "Have a good day," and kept walking, gripping the handle of my carry-on so hard my knuckles ached. I could feel my heart pounding, not because I thought they'd physically confront me, but because I was suddenly aware that this story could follow me beyond the airport. And then it hit me. In today's world, this passenger refused to switch seats, could easily turn into a TikTok, a Facebook rant, or a Reddit post. The family could twist the story however they wanted, and a bunch of strangers online could decide I was the villain without knowing a single detail. By the time I reached baggage claim, I was paranoid enough to scan for anyone holding their phone in that subtle, "I'm filming you without permission" way. I couldn't tell if I was overreacting or just finally realizing how quickly a small decision can spiral. That's when I overheard a voice behind me say, "That's the one I was telling you about." I turned around, and sure enough, it was the same guy who had walked past my seat mid-flight and told me, "Kindness goes a long way." He was talking to a woman, maybe his wife, who gave me a sharp, disapproving look. It was official. I wasn't just the passenger anymore. I was a cautionary tale. By the time I got home that evening, I was exhausted, not just from travel, but from the constant feeling of being silently judged for hours. I thought maybe a hot shower and some food would help me shake it off. I was wrong. I made the mistake of opening my phone while waiting for my dinner to heat up. I don't know what I expected, probably just the usual flood of promotional emails and spam. But instead, the very first thing that popped up in my Facebook feed was a post in a local community group. Beware of people with no compassion when traveling. Just had the worst experience on a flight today. There was a blurry sideways photo attached. My stomach dropped so hard I actually felt a little dizzy. The picture wasn't crystal clear, but it didn't need to be. It was me in my seat, headphones in, arms crossed. The caption read, "She refused to switch so a family could sit together, even though we had a child involved." What happened to kindness in the world? Within an hour of the post being up, there were already over 100 comments. People I didn't even know were debating whether I was selfish or just exercising my right to the seat I paid for. The majority weren't on my side. One comment stuck out. "She looks like she's in her late 20s, probably entitled and spoiled. People like her are why society's falling apart." I wanted to reply, to explain that I had booked my seat months in advance, paid extra for it, and wasn't obligated to give it up, especially for free. But I knew how that would look. Defensive, self-serving, maybe even smug. And worse, anything I said could be screenshotted and shared even more widely. The thing that really got under my skin, though, was the half-truth in their story. They made it sound like I had been asked politely once and coldly said no. In reality, the mother had been pushy, the father had barely looked at me, and the alternative seat they were offering was objectively worse. But nuance doesn't go viral, villains do. By midnight, the post had migrated to Twitter, and a few of my friends had already texted me, "Hey, is this you?" One of them even attached a laughing emoji, as if it was some hilarious misunderstanding instead of a growing public shaming campaign. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept cycling between anger, embarrassment, and the creeping fear that this might actually affect my job or my reputation in ways I couldn't control. All because I wanted to sit in the seat I paid for. The next morning, I woke up to find that the post had been picked up by a popular travel drama Instagram account with over 500,000 followers. The caption read, "Would you give up your seat for a family? Or are you team keep it?" The comments section was a battlefield. And then I saw it. Someone had linked my LinkedIn profile. Seeing my LinkedIn profile tagged in the comments felt like a punch to the gut. I'd always been careful to keep my professional life and personal life separate online. But apparently, that didn't matter anymore. A few strangers had already left passive-aggressive comments on my recent work posts. Things like, "Hope you treat your clients better than you treat families on planes," and "Wouldn't want to work with someone so selfish." I immediately set all my accounts to private, but I knew the damage was done. Once something is out there, you can't stuff it back into the box. At work, I was jittery all morning, constantly checking my phone like it was a bomb about to go off. I prayed nobody in the office had seen the post, but by lunchtime, my manager knocked on my cubicle wall with a tight smile and said, "Hey, can we talk?" My stomach sank. We went into a small meeting room and she shut the door. "So," she began carefully, "there's been a bit of chatter online and someone forwarded a post to HR. I don't really care about your personal travel arrangements, but we just need to make sure it doesn't reflect badly on the company." I tried to explain, sticking to the facts. I booked the seat, I paid for it, I wasn't obligated to switch. My manager nodded along, but I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced, or maybe she just didn't want to be seen as defending me too strongly. In the corporate world, optics are everything. Just maybe lay low for a while, she suggested. Don't engage with any of it. Easier said than done. That night, I got a message request from an account I didn't recognize. The message read, "You ruined that poor family's trip. Hope you're proud of yourself." Another one said, "Next time, buy a private jet if you can't handle being a decent human." Part of me wanted to delete all my social media and disappear for a month. Another part wanted to double down and post a detailed account of what really happened, complete with receipts, timestamps, and seat maps. But I knew that would only feed the fire. And yet, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that my silence was letting their version of the story win. By the end of the week, the online noise had died down slightly, but I was still jumpy every time my phone buzzed. I kept replaying the interaction on the plane in my head, wondering if there had been some magical way to avoid all this fallout. But the truth was, unless I had caved and given up my seat, none of these people would have been satisfied. The question was, did I regret it? At that point, I didn't. But something was about to happen that would make me second-guess everything. It happened 2 weeks later, when I'd almost convinced myself the whole ordeal was fading into the background. I was in the airport, again, different city, different airline, work trip this time, and I'd just settled into my gate area with a coffee and my noise-canceling headphones, when I heard a voice say, "Well, if it isn't the plane seat hoarder." At first, I thought I imagined it. But when I looked up, there she was, the same mother from my infamous flight, standing a few feet away with a carry-on bag and that same piercing glare I remembered. I froze. My brain ran through every possible response in a fraction of a second. Ignore her, apologize, defend myself, laugh it off. Before I could decide, she kept going. "You cost my kids the chance to sit with their father. Do you have any idea how traumatic that was for them?" she demanded, her voice loud enough for at least half the gate to hear. A few people looked up from their phones, curious. I took a deep breath. "I didn't cost anyone anything," I said evenly. "I paid for my seat in advance. You asked me to give it up. I said no, that's it." As she scoffed, "You're unbelievable. I've told that story to so many people. And you know what? Every single one of them agrees you're selfish." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the absurdity of it all. "Then maybe you should also tell them you booked the cheapest tickets without seat assignments for a family of 4, and expected strangers to fix that for you," I shot back. Her face went red. "We didn't expect anything." "You absolutely did," I interrupted, my voice sharper now. "You approached me and assumed I'd give up something I paid for, so you could have what you wanted. And when I didn't, you decided to make me into the villain. That's not my problem, it's yours." There was a tense silence. She stared at me like she wanted to keep arguing, but then she just shook her head and muttered something under her breath before walking away. The people around us, most pretending not to listen, suddenly found their phones very interesting again. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I'd stood my ground again. Still, the encounter left me rattled. It was one thing to deal with strangers online, but face-to-face confrontation? That was a whole different level, and it made me realize something unsettling. This wasn't just some viral story that would disappear into internet history. This woman remembered me, and she clearly still carried that anger. And if she could find me here, what were the odds this was the last time? I thought the airport encounter would be the peak of weirdness, but life had other plans. About a week after that, I was in the middle of a morning meeting when my boss's assistant poked her head into the conference room and said, Um, there's a delivery for you in reception. Confused, I excused myself and walked out, only to find a massive cardboard box on the counter. No return address, just my name in big block letters. My first thought was that it was some kind of promotional thing from a client. My second thought was, what if it's not? I carefully opened it, and inside was a giant plush airplane, like comically oversized. Taped to it was a note in red marker. Hope you enjoy your seat since you love it so much. My stomach dropped. I didn't have to guess who sent it. Unfortunately, my coworkers had followed me out to see what the fuss was about, and now they were whispering to each other. What's that about? One of them asked with a grin. It's a long story, I muttered, already feeling my face heat up. But word travels fast in an office, and by lunch, the entire floor knew. People started asking me if I was that plane guy they'd seen online. Some thought it was hilarious. Others clearly judged me. It was surreal. I'd worked at this company for years without making much of a splash. And now I was the guy who wouldn't switch seats on a plane. Not for my work, not for my skills, just for this. Later that day, my boss called me into his office. So, I heard about this airplane thing, he said carefully. Is there anything I should know? Are we going to end up in some PR mess? I assured him it was just a personal incident, that I hadn't broken any laws or company policies. He nodded, but I could tell he was uneasy. The worst part was that I couldn't stop thinking about that box. It meant she had my work address, and I had no idea how she got it. That night, I double-checked my LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, every public profile I had. And there it was. I'd once posted a photo from the office lobby with the company name in the background. Combine that with my name from the flight manifest and some internet digging and, well, it didn't take a genius. It was a chilling reminder. This wasn't just a random angry stranger anymore. This was someone who was willing to blur the line between online shaming and real-life harassment. And I had a feeling she wasn't done yet. The next escalation came faster than I expected. 2 days after the giant plush airplane incident, I got home from work and found an envelope wedged into my apartment doorframe. No postage, no name, just my address written in large, sharp letters. Inside was a printed photo of me at the airport the day of the flight. Not just a blurry candid. This was zoomed in, high resolution, clearly taken from a short distance away. Someone had been watching me. On the back of the photo, in the same red marker as before, was written, "Next time, think about others." I froze in my hallway, the hum of my fridge suddenly sounding deafening. This wasn't just some petty internet beef anymore. This was stalking. I called the police. They took a statement, asked if I'd noticed anyone following me, and advised me to install security cameras and keep my doors locked at all times. They couldn't do much without proof of who was behind it, but I had a sick feeling in my gut that I already knew. I installed a camera in my entryway that night. I also messaged a friend who worked in IT security to help me check if my personal information had been leaked anywhere. He confirmed what I feared. My full name, address, and even partial phone number had been posted in a thread connected to the viral video of the incident. Someone had doxed me. The internet, which I'd always thought of as just a background hum in my life, suddenly felt like an open wound. Anyone could reach in and touch me now. That weekend, I barely left my apartment. Every sound in the hallway made me tense. I started keeping the blinds closed and triple-checking my locks before bed. Then, on Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. My heart pounded. I checked the camera feed, nothing. Just an empty hallway. When I opened the door, there was a small box on the floor. Inside, a toy plane, a travel-sized pack of tissues, and a handwritten note that said simply, "Cry more." I realized then that this wasn't going to stop on its own. Whoever she was, she wanted to make me pay, and I needed to figure out how to end it before she pushed even further. By Monday, I had made a plan. I couldn't let this continue to escalate. I blocked and reported every account that had contacted me, filed another report with the police about the doxing and the packages, and even informed my building management about the harassment so they could be on alert. I was done hiding. I also realized something important. The longer I stayed silent, the more power I gave her. She wanted me to feel guilty, ashamed, and scared. I refused to give her that satisfaction. That afternoon, I went to work as usual, even though my stomach was still in knots. During lunch, a few coworkers approached me cautiously. "Are you okay?" one asked. "We heard about all of it online." I nodded. "I'm fine. It's just harassment annoying, but I'm handling it. I don't regret my choice on the plane, and I won't let this affect my life." Word spread quickly through the office. Some colleagues were sympathetic, others skeptical. But for the first time, I felt like I was reclaiming the narrative. The real turning point came 2 weeks later. The same mother tried to confront me again, this time in a public cafe. She started ranting about how selfish I had been, but I didn't flinch. I calmly said, "I made a choice, and it was my right to do so. You can be upset, but it doesn't give you the right to harass me or invade my life." People nearby began paying attention. A few even nodded in agreement. She left, frustrated, realizing she had no power over me in this moment. Slowly, the harassment began to die down. Without the thrill of seeing me flinch or respond, the online mobs lost interest. The plush airplane remained on a shelf as a reminder of how absurdly far this had gone, but also as proof that I had survived it. In the end, I learned that standing firm, even in the face of intense social pressure, can be isolating and stressful, but sometimes necessary. I hadn't switched seats, and yes, people judged me. But I also had the satisfaction of knowing that I made a choice for myself, not out of malice, but out of reason. Life went back to normal eventually. I traveled again, sat in my preferred seats, and kept a healthy distance from anyone who might judge based on a single moment. And whenever I think back on that flight, I remind myself, standing your ground may make you unpopular temporarily, but it also defines the boundaries you refuse to let anyone cross. The story might have gone viral, the world might have judged, but at the end of the day, I was still me calm, composed, and uncompromised.